we're just going to get started and let everyone join us as they come. Thank you all so much. Happy Tuesday. I kept reminding myself, what day is it today? So I'm just going to keep saying it all day. Happy Tuesday to everyone. Welcome to the 2025 Access, Innovation, and Disability Symposium. We are excited to have you here today. Funding for this symposium was made possible through the CU Boulder's Impact Grant, which we're super excited for, and the Office for Access and Community Engagement in the College of Arts and Sciences, CU Libraries, and Be Well. So thank you so much to all of the sponsors and for all the folks who have made today happen. My name is Dr. Patricia Gonzalez. You are welcome to call me Patricia, she, ella pronouns, and I am a member of this year's Symposium Planning Committee and also serve as the Assistant Dean for Access and Community Engagement in the College of Arts and Sciences. Before I introduce our amazing speaker for today, I would like to remind everyone to please mute yourself, or I will mute you as well if you're not able to find that option during the presentation. And also, closed captioning is available by clicking the CC button. But before, please do feel free to use the chat. We also want to encourage you to use the chat and including the reactions of emojis, also sharing some love, whether that's questions or thoughts or anything that comes up for you in this session in the chat. And we will have an opportunity to interact with today's speaker at the end of our session, where we will also stop our recording so that there's a more comfortable conversation for everyone. So feel free to raise your hand and also use the chat during our Q&A portion. Thank you for joining us for today's session, from Misdiagnosis to Advocacy, Psychological Resilience, and Creating Inclusive Classroom Environments by Dr. Hughes. This presentation explores a personal and professional transformation from experiencing misdiagnosed throughout college, graduate school, and tenure-track position to becoming an advocate for inclusive education. Drawing on lived experience and research in positive psychology, attendees today, you all will gain a perspective in how and if you had to do it or I had to do it, they will have to fix it. And that is the mindset that can lead to creating exclusive classroom environments for students and burnout for faculty, and how a shift in perspective can transform teaching practices towards greater inclusivity and accessibility for students and more balanced workplace for faculty. Please note that this session is being recorded for those of you who just joined us and will be available in our ACE YouTube channel. Marisha's going to put a link in the chat for that YouTube channel where you can also access other recordings, including some of the recordings from last year's symposium. Now it is my pleasure to introduce you all to Dr. Hughes. Dr. Hughes earned her PhD in psychology from the University of North Carolina. But it's hilarious to say her PhD stands for Professional House and Dog Sitter. In 2016, not 2026, 2016, she quit her first academic job as tenure associate professor. And for the next 8 years, she and her husband traveled across the country to take care of other people's pets and homes while she pursued her dream of being an author. She now works as an assistant teaching professor in psychology and neuroscience department at the University of Colorado Boulder, where she is teaching general psychology and upper level lab methods courses in positive psychology as well as conservation psychology. Thank you all for being here today. And now I want to welcome you, Dr. Hughes. Welcome to the space.
Thank you so much. That was such a warm welcome. Can you all see my screen okay? Okay, well, great. I don't need to introduce myself again because Patricia did such a wonderful job. I just wanted to say thank you for everyone taking the time from your busy and packed schedules to be here today. I know that it can be hard to prioritize coming to presentations like this, so I truly do appreciate it. All right. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to give you a very quick introduction, and that will segue into, well, how did I go from this exclusive classroom environment to being an advocate for inclusivity. But in order to do that, I have to tell you a little bit more about myself. So you will journey with me in a retrospective from 1980 to today. And that then segues into the personal transformation that I just mentioned and how that I became an advocate for inclusive teaching techniques. And I anticipate speaking for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. All right, let me just also get my timer going. Okay, here we go. So I had that lovely introduction, but really, who am I to speak about access, innovation, and disability? And so the sum of all my parts really is key to understanding this transformation that I went to. So I'm going to ask you to journey with me throughout my childhood, and I will share my key observations with you from having that lived experience, but also in hindsight, the psychological perspective and the expertise that I now have gives me really keen insights into what the heck went wrong with me and the steps that I took to essentially make a lot of changes. And when I look back on this journey and from that psychological perspective, you do need to know about this term called cognitive distortions. And so this is essentially when you look at the world with your mindset, but that your mindset doesn't necessarily reflect an accurate picture of reality. So the psychological definition, it's these faulty beliefs and perspectives we have about ourselves and the world around us. As I go through this presentation, I'm going to cover a lot of cognitive distortions, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are many more out there that I will not be talking about, but all cognitive distortions share the same three features. They are a tendency or a pattern of thinking or believing, they are false or inaccurate, and they do have the potential to cause psychological damage, which is what happened to me. So we will get started with my first foray into academia, which is me being in nursery school when I was 3 years old in 1980. And that is a great time to be a little kid running around playing. But I also, because I had a brother who is about 19 months older than me, he was learning to read in kindergarten, and I was just this little sponge absorbing everything. I also had a very pro literary household growing up. My mom took us to the library all the time. She would take us to bookstores. If we were in regular stores and there was a book that I wanted, she would almost always buy it, no questions asked. And so, of course, being this little kid, learning to read earlier than a lot of people, and then loving reading, becoming this prolific reader, I don't think it will surprise anyone in here that from my time in pre-K through 8th grade, I was at the top of the class. No matter what the subject, no matter what I was doing, no matter who my peers were, I was at the very top. And that might sound like a really great thing, but what was happening internally in my mind is that I was developing this self concept of, oh, this is my role in the classroom and in my family and in the world at large. I am the smart kid. And so that became my identity. Now, the problem is that I tied my self worth into that identity of being a smart kid, which meant if I ever exhibited signs of not being the smart kid, that meant I personally didn't feel very worthy. Now, this wasn't a problem for pre K through 8th grade, because, like I said, I was at the top of the class. But what happened in my preteen, early teen years is I started to struggle. At this point, I was having a lot of trouble with my sleep, right? I was having insomnia, I couldn't fall asleep. My dad was giving me these relaxation tapes to listen to and progressive muscle relaxation, and I was trying so many things and it wasn't working. And so consequently, I was struggling now with many aspects of school. And my grades dropped in some of my subjects. And I was also just right, like I was in puberty. Like my hormones and my emotions were on a roller coaster multiple times a day, every single day, without ceasing. And so I also did not, even though I was like very academically smart, I did not really have any emotional intelligence skills. And I didn't know how to name my emotions or how to feel my feelings or how to deal with them in a positive and constructive manner. So there was a lot of attention seeking on my part. There was a lot of temper tantrums, even as a teenager, and just a lot of emotional outbursts. Now, my brain was also not helping the situation because I was starting to really experience a lot of cognitive distortions. The first one was discounting the positive. Now, you can very clearly see from my key observations that I said I was struggling with many aspects of school, and my grades dropped in some subjects. But when you're discounting the positive, you dismiss any positive aspects of a situation and you focus on the negative, right? I shared with you that I was a reader and I loved books. So the classes that I was still doing well with, that I was still enjoying in high school, those were the English classes, the ones where books were essential to doing well. I was still doing well. I was not necessarily at the top of the class, but my grades weren't now dropping to like the B and the C level. I was also experiencing a lot of polarized thinking. So, this is when you think in absolute terms. You're either good or bad, you're right or wrong, you're always never. And so, because I was discounting the positive and focusing on the negative, it was now like, oh, well, I'm not a good student anymore, so I must be a bad student. And because of my previous connection to my self worth, to that identity of being a good student, it became as internalized as, well, maybe I'm not a good person, and maybe there should be a lot of shame and guilt in the fact that I'm no longer at the top of the class. And what does that mean? And then also during this time, because grades were so important to me and to the high school, I really started to develop what's now I now know is called a fixed mindset, which is that one's belief that one's abilities, intelligence, and talents that they're static and they can't be improved. So to me, it was like, well, I guess I like hit my peak like in elementary school and I just can't learn anymore because to me struggling meant that like this was it. I wasn't going to ever get better at what I was doing. Now, the thing about having sleep issues that I didn't anticipate is when I went to college and I no longer had to be at school by 7:30 in the morning and follow their schedule about when I could eat and when I could go to the bathroom and take my breaks. I actually excelled when I got into college because those constraints were off of me. And I became a superstar student. I mean, you can see the accolades under my key observations. Like, I was back to being the top. But what I often did not do was challenge myself or take risks. So, a really great example that also played into some of these cognitive distortions that I have listed is one of my lowest grades, and you'll probably be laughing about this, but I got a B plus in Chem 1. And I thought, well, that's not good. Like a B plus, how horrible. And so I thought, well, when I think about like the cognitive distortion of fortune telling, which is expecting to know what's going to happen in the future, in my mind, well, I didn't do well in Chem 1, so that meant I wasn't going to do well in Chem 2. And so that meant like for me that natural sciences were going to be harder. So I'm just not going to take Chem 2 or organic chem. I'm not going to pursue medical school anymore. Like that's just going to be too hard for me. I would rather than like, I was really internalizing that fixed mindset, and it became all about getting the A. And that's what was motivating me. So it's not like I was truly looking for learning opportunities. Now, I will say that I genuinely loved psychology and I wanted to take every psychology class that I could. And in fact, like at all the lab and methods courses that my college offered, I took them all. But on the flip side, we have this hypervigilance for any sign of imperfection. And so for me, how that manifested, so my college GPA was a 3.93. And until the fall semester in my senior year, it was a 4.0 in psychology. And then when I took the history of psychology, I did not read carefully the guidelines for the final paper. I did not write it in APA style. And I got graded a D on that paper. And I ended up getting an A minus in the class. And for me, that was just the epitome of the polarized thinking, right? Because I was no longer like the top of psychology students. And that minus meant like my whole life was over. And I am not exaggerating. I spent the entire first week of winter break sobbing over that A minus because it pretty much just decimated my sense of who I was and this fixation I had with getting A's. Now, because I did so well in undergraduate, like kind of ignoring these cognitive distortions and the fact that I was crying over A minuses, I thought graduate school was going to be more of the same. But what happened when I got to graduate school, I'm now struggling with everything academically. My sleep is at an all-time worst case scenario. I couldn't fall asleep at night. I could only fall asleep in the morning when I was expected to be at class. I lost focus. I would fall asleep in my graduate classes. Part of it was because I was no longer in control of my schedule. There were only very specific classes I could take as a graduate student, which means I couldn't schedule a class to not be Friday morning at 9 a.m. And that was such a struggle for me. And so I developed depression and anxiety. And I went to go see doctors about this. And they would be like, yeah, you sound like you have depression. And I would say, but if we go back further, it's actually the sleep issues that are causing me a lot of trouble and a lot of concern. I was like, well, can we talk about that? And every single doctor I went to said something along the lines of, well, depression can manifest itself in different ways. So let's treat your depression and hopefully that will help everything. And so I got to the point where I was struggling so much that I decided I needed to take a leave of absence from graduate school. And if you had asked me at that point in my life, I would have said, like, academically, like, this is the lowest I could ever get. There was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. I didn't even tell my family I was taking a leave of absence. I was pretending the whole time. Now, remember, like, this was back in the 90s, and so communication was very different. And we weren't texting with our family every day. So it's not necessarily that I was lying to them, but there was a lot of omission going on. And even though I thought that was going to be the lowest point of my life, it actually turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made because I started a job as a research assistant at the School of Medicine at my university. And I found a really great mentor who made me feel seen and made me feel like I was valued. And when I talked about being in high school all those slides ago, one of the things I didn't mention is I had a really hard time making friends and I got bullied a lot. But when I was at this position at the medical school, I was working with a group of women who were very similar to me in many aspects, and we became such good friends, and we're still friends to this day. So having that emotional support, having that mentorship meant that when I finally went back a year later to finish my dissertation, it took me 2 more years. And I was able to do it because the coursework was done. I had that mentorship. I had that emotional support. I ended up having some presentations and publications, and I won a minor award at the university in terms of my research for my dissertation. It meant that when the time came for me to apply for tenure track positions, oh, sorry, I skipped all of my cognitive distortions, but these are ones that I've been talking about before. Right. So as a graduate student, I was saying things like I should be able to stay awake, like I should be able to do this. I was able to do it in undergrad. The catastrophizing, right? I was talking about how when I had to take that leave of absence, I really thought it was going to be the worst thing to ever happen to me. Like there was that extremely polarized thinking. It's not like this was a chance for me to reassess and take a break. It was just like, I am a bad person. I am a bad student. I will not be able to overcome this. And I was like overgeneralizing. I was just like, well, I'm a failure in graduate school. I'm going to be a failure in the real world. Like, how am I going to find this job? And that's why the emotional support and the mentorship that I received, that's why it was so helpful to me because it really got me thinking like, okay, well, with the right tools, maybe I could be different. Now that was message was like in the back of my mind and it took me a few more years to get there. But I was also going through a lot of personalization and blame, thinking that like this was all entirely my fault. Now, I can't really say that the health issues were my fault. Like I was experiencing that, but I can remember times when the faculty in my program were not kind to me, where they were not supportive, and dare I even say, like, there was some cruelty, right? Like when I was falling asleep in class, to force me to stand up for the rest of the class in front of everyone because I could not stay awake. And I remember writing my yearly reports about being in graduate school saying things like, I don't know why I can't stay awake. Like I'm going to see doctors, right? Nobody is helping me. And I really like blamed myself so much for that. And in hindsight, there's this question of, well, why weren't any of the people in leadership in my department asking the questions of, well, what's happening to Kelly? Like, why is she struggling so much? Why can't she stay awake in class? Instead of just making assumptions. And I felt like I wasn't being seen for who I was because frankly, I was so tired. Like I didn't know who I was. And then it was really just like all about the grades. Like I started off that first year in graduate school, I had high passes for everything. And then they dropped down into just plain old passes. And you might be thinking, well, that's not even close to failing. And you're right. Like I was getting the work done, but I really didn't feel like I was learning. And I felt like I was floundering. And like that's the problem with these distortions is that you really cannot see the accuracy and the veracity of the situation. Like you get so stuck up in your head. Now, all that to say, because of my mentorship and the emotional support, I did land a tenure track assistant professor position. And it was again because that was so much that first year I did struggle. And I would come home from work and I would turn on the oven to warm something up for dinner and I would fall asleep on my couch. And then it would be things like I would fall asleep in my office and I would just be like, oh my gosh, like I cannot live like this for the rest of my life. And at that point, I had pretty good health insurance. And I found a doctor, a neurologist who specializes in sleep. And I was just like, okay, this is my last shot. If she can't do anything to help me, like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And within 5 minutes of meeting me, she was like, I think I know what your problem is. And so basically, after that, I just crushed it, right? Like there were multiple publications and presentations. 1 year, I had more publications and presentations than my entire department combined. Now, to be clear, this was a very small, not for profit, liberal arts based university. So the competition wasn't fierce. But oh my gosh, did I internalize that? I also had outstanding service and I had mostly outstanding teaching evaluations. So you might be curious now, what exactly did that doctor tell me between my first and my second year that allowed me to go from just like pretty much like, I don't know how I'm going to survive this to like rocking it and being a superstar again? And so in 2008, I was diagnosed with narcolepsy, which is a sleep disorder, and it is considered a disability under the American with Disabilities Act. And it's funny because like I have a doctorate in psychology, right? Like my PhD is studying things like narcolepsy, except I really didn't study sleep when I was in college, when I was in graduate school. It was maybe like a tenth of a percent, or maybe a little more than that, like maybe 2% of what I was doing. And so I just thought narcolepsy was what you saw that's grossly misportrayed in the media a lot of time for laughs. So, in case you also have those ideas about what narcolepsy is, here's what narcolepsy actually is. The primary symptom is excessive daytime sleepiness. Now, sometimes it does elevate to a sleep attack where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to close my eyes now and take a nap. And sometimes it just manifests itself like if I am in a meeting that's not the most riveting meeting, and then they turn off the lights to show us a PowerPoint. Yeah, there is like a very good chance I will fall asleep. It is very unlikely that I would be on a date with someone and I would fall asleep, or I'd be having dinner and fall asleep in my meal, like in my bowl of soup. Like that doesn't happen. Now, that could happen if you had the loss of muscle control, but that's not necessarily related to the daytime sleep attacks. It is also characterized by poor nighttime sleep. So, people with narcolepsy, we spend more time in the rapid eye movement, REM sleep, which is the dreaming stage, rather than stage four, which is deep sleep. And our dreams are incredibly vivid. They're usually emotional and traumatic. And we have a hard time when we wake up reorienting ourselves into reality. And a lot of times we can't remember if what happened was in our dream or if it was real. And we are very likely to wake up feeling post traumatic stress every morning because our brain is processing the images and the dreams the same way as if we were processing it awake. So that is a lot of emotional trauma to wake up to every day. We're also prone to hallucinations upon falling asleep and upon waking up, and our body can go into a state of paralysis where we can't move when we're sleeping. That can also manifest itself in your dreams. So if you've ever had a dream where you can't yell or you can't move or you can't run, that would be an example of sleep paralysis. And then cataplexy, which is a loss of muscle control, usually goes along with narcolepsy. I don't usually have full loss of muscle control, but it can make me clumsier, or sometimes I stumble over my words, or like I can get a case of what I call the dropsies. And so I alluded to the fact that like I was just like crushing it. Not alluding, like I flat out said like I was crushing it when I was in my tenure track position. And I had mostly outstanding teaching evaluations. Like I started off like really loving the job, and then I got my diagnosis. And then a weird thing happened because the longer I taught, like the lower my teaching evaluations got. And so a lot of the internalization that I had been doing, like blaming myself for a lot of things, once I got that diagnosis, I started dumping out and projecting onto the students. So where I used to say like, oh, I should be able to do this, I was now saying, well, the students should be able to do this. When I was in college, like I did whatever it took to get the work done, even though I had undiagnosed narcolepsy. Like they, if I had to do it, like they have to do it, right? So I was shooting all over them. I was also making a lot of overgeneralizations. So I can't remember if I've defined that one yet, but that's when you assume that future experiences will have the same outcome based on a few events. So if a student dropped the ball once, then I would overgeneralize and be like, okay, well, that's just not a good student, right? Like they're just going to cause headaches for me. I shouldn't give my best time and effort to them because they're just going to essentially waste it. Because again, I was also shooting on them and comparing them to me as a college student, where I would basically like have to be on death's door before I wouldn't do the requirements of me. I was also experiencing a lot of just world thinking, which is assuming that everyone and everything is balanced and judged fairly. And so I wasn't being judged fairly in my time at graduate school. And so I was essentially, without realizing it, like I was doing the same things to the students. I had become the person or the people who had been just making my graduate school experience so much harder than it had to be. I was now doing that for the undergraduate students. And to be clear, like the students hadn't changed. This was how my brain was handling the fact that I had this narcolepsy diagnosis, and like looking back at all of the struggles and all of the heartache and all of the pain that I had overcome. And I didn't think it was fair for these students to just like get away with having extensions and me having to accommodate them for taking the exam at a different time. Because what I was also doing, it was is an attribution error called actor observer bias. And so that is when so I make situational allowances for my scholastic struggles, yet I blame the students for their abilities or their characteristics. So I was really struggling, but that was okay because I had narcolepsy. They're really struggling because they're just, they're lazy, or they're trying to pull one over on me, or they don't care. And so I was attributing their behaviors in a very different way than what I was attributing my behaviors to in retrospect. And so it's not going to surprise any of you that, of course, I became burnt out. I became disengaged. I became very angry at the students. I became very resentful of them. I basically lost all my compassion. I did not think of them as students who had to grow up in the era of mass shooters. I did not think of them as students who had to grow up in like unstable financial times with like the tech bubble bursting and the housing market situation and student loans skyrocketing. Like none of that was in my mindset. It was just like I was so mad and I was so angry because I struggled so much and I just didn't think it was fair that these students would get the easy way out. And just from like a psychological perspective, I mean, like all the roller coaster and back and forth, the years of proving myself and then feeling that I wasn't good enough, and then years of proving myself, and just like the hypervigilance about my performance, looking for any crack to suggest that I might be falling backward into a time of struggle or into a time of quote unquote failure. And then just managing a chronic health condition. It is not easy to manage narcolepsy. Even when I was being treated at that time, I still struggled a lot. And then there's just like a heavy burden of thinking that you are the superstar and then having to maintain that image of yourself day in and day out in a highly academic setting. And so I ended up in 2014, I applied for a sabbatical, and it turned out I did not miss teaching at all. And so when I look at the psychological perspective of that, like I had a lot of negative feelings and a lot of negative emotions and just a lot of angst and a lot of pain from being a professor. And so when I took that break, all of that was removed from me. I started feeling better. So that was actually reinforcing the idea that maybe I'm not supposed to be in the classroom anymore. I realized that I had lost all kinds of intrinsic motivation for being a teacher. I didn't want to do it anymore. I didn't see what the point was. It wasn't filling me with a sense of purpose. It wasn't filling me with a sense of joy. It just felt like a job and a burden. And my values were so misaligned that when I was preparing for this presentation and I was thinking about it, like I can't even tell you what my values were from between like 99 to 2014. Like I just couldn't even name what was going on with me then. And so when I came back from my sabbatical, it was August of 2015, and I was done. Now, you might notice that on this slide, it says I was done, period. And that is the only punctuation I included in all of these bullet points across these slides because it was like, I was done, full stop, emphatic. There's like, I'm not going to do this anymore. And I remember I was walking across campus one day in early spring of 2016, and I crossed paths with the dean, and nobody wanted me to leave. Like they thought I was nuts because I was done, period. That meant I had turned in my resignation on September 1st of 2015, effective May 31st, 2016, because I wanted the university to have the time to do a full search to replace me with a tenure track position. They did not want me to leave. And so when my paths crossed with the dean in spring of 2016, she said to me, Kelly, come to my office. We are prepared to make you offers you can't even imagine. And I did not even take that meeting because I realized that there was no extrinsic change that could come to this job because I was in an intrinsic crisis. What I realized, and to quote Taylor Swift, it's me. I'm the problem here, right? Like the students hadn't changed, the job hadn't changed. I was the one that had changed. And I was so mad and angry about my experiences. And then getting that diagnosis felt so good. But then I was so mad at the struggles that I went through that I was dumping out on students. I realized I am not okay and I should not be in the classroom. And even though I started out as a really great teacher and having the best intentions, I've described it before as like I was taking poison every day until I woke up one day and I just wasn't myself. And so that meant I had to remove myself from the situation. Now, to be clear, as a white woman of privilege, this was much easier for me to do, right? Like I can't remember if I'm a third or fourth generation college student. But what that means is like there was trickle down economics just in my family, right? Like when I was in college, I did not have to take out any student loans. I did not have to work. So when I went to graduate school, I was on a full ride. And so I graduated with no student loans and getting a salary, and it was just me. And so I'm already like starting off my life up here. And so by the time I make the decision to leave teaching, it's because I have been in this place of privilege and it allows myself the time and the energy and the effort to really be introspective and to reflect on what was going on. And I realized I was going to have to work on my resilience because I was not successfully adapting. I had a lot of emotions and a lot of anger and just a lot of living that I didn't get to do because I was so busy being a perfectionist and being on the fixed mindset roller coaster of now I'm a failure. Oh, but wait, now I'm a superstar, but now I'm back to a failure. And so I needed that time away. And because I was not confident that I could do both, and because I felt like I was harming some of my students, I felt like I had to remove myself from the classroom. And so I took an 8-year break. And what Patricia said at the beginning, like, yeah, my husband and I, we became professional pet and house sitters, and we traveled the country as nomads. And it was a really good break because during that time, I reminded myself, of all of the reasons that I loved psychology. And I became familiar with the field of positive psychology, which was just coming into its own right around the time I was graduating from college. So the term positive psychology was coined in 1999 by a researcher named Martin Seligman. And he looked at it as if saying, well, why are we focused so much on what happens after mental illness is in place and the people are really struggling? Like, what are some of the protective factors that we could study? Like, what are the evidence-based approaches we have out there that will support human flourishing and well-being? And so I became familiar with all of these protective factors, things like emphasizing positive emotions, feeling those negative emotions, but making sure you have a higher balance of positive to negative. Feeling like you are engaged and have agency and autonomy over your life to the extent possible that you can. Prioritizing those relationships and especially prioritizing those positive relationships, feeling like your life has purpose, tying that to a meaning and reflecting on that on a regular basis, and then having a sense of an achievement, something that you're working towards that may or may not be higher than yourself. And that if you can tie these things together, you're going to be a much more well off individual in terms of your physical, mental, and emotional health. I also became familiar with a part of positive psychology called character strengths. And these are our these are positive personality traits that allow us to flourish. So when we focus on living with our character strengths, we're again setting ourselves up to have higher levels of well-being. And so it turned out that the life that I had been living wasn't tapping into these strengths that are core to my character. Things like appreciation of beauty and excellence, honesty, right? Like I had never shared with anyone the struggles really that I was having. So I wasn't living my most authentic life. I wasn't living creatively. I wasn't expressing gratitude. I was persevering, but it was with that fixed mindset. So it truly was to be at my detriment. Now, what's funny to me is when I applied to be in this symposium and they were like, "Yeah, we would love to have you present." They sent me this template of how they wanted our slides to be, and it had a lot of filler information, like suggestions and these quotes. And so when this quote was in the presentation template, I was like, "Oh no, done. Like I am absolutely gonna use this in my presentation," because I realized that if I were to ever enter teaching or academia again, like I now knew how to be that professor that I always wanted to be. Like I had worked through the anger and I had worked through the resentment. And I had to work through the emotions and process like how I very likely harmed some of the students with my inflexibility, with my if I had to do it, then you have to do it mindset. I was not kind and compassionate. And I had to do a lot of forgiveness work with myself. And if I ever see any of those students face to face again, you better believe the first thing I will say to them is, I am so sorry for the way I acted in that class, or for the way I treated you, or for the way I didn't give you the encouragement and support that you needed. Because this quote from Maya Angelou, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. It was a lot of also psychological processing on my part because I realized that the way that I was feeling in graduate school, I had turned around and I had been doing that to students. And so there was a lot of guilt and a lot of regret and a lot of shame that I had to work through. And so when my husband and I got very tired of the nomadic lifestyle and we thought about reintegrating back into society and getting what I will call quote unquote real jobs, I really considered carefully like, do I want to go back to teaching? Right? Like, what if it's the same as it was before? Like, I could start out strong, but I could lose myself. Or what if I just, like, I haven't really learned my lesson? I was like, okay, now wait, like, challenge that assumption. Is that like my old way of thinking? And so, one of the things that I decided is unless I considered it to be the right teaching position for me, I was not just going to apply to any job willy-nilly. And so I looked for things like I would be teaching faculty, where I wouldn't be on the tenure track or there wouldn't be a research component. And I looked to make sure I could teach courses that really gave me a sense of meaning and purpose. courses like positive psychology or conservation psychology, which is also an area that I had been really interested in and engaged with during my time away. And so those were the only jobs that I applied for. And so I was very lucky and very grateful to get this teaching assistant professor position at CU Boulder. And so when I came back to the classroom, I did a lot of like deep diving and reflection and thinking about, okay, what am I going to do differently? And so now I consider this like Professor 2.0. And when I talk about creating an inclusive classroom, these are suggestions for you as the faculty or you as the person in charge. And then I'm going to have some for the actual classroom itself. But these are questions or strategies or bullet points that I encourage you to focus yourself on. And first and foremost, that is identify your big why and who you will be for the students. And I think it is really helpful to actually write out a mission statement for your role as professor. And so I decided that I will be the person who sees students as they are, and I will meet them where they are at, like full stop, that's it. Right? Like, yes, I will also teach them psychology and I will do my best to get them really excited about psychology. But first and foremost, every student will know at all times that they matter in my class because I don't ever want a student to feel like I did when I was in graduate school or how I suspect I made some students feel when I was a professor my first time around. I also encourage you to center your teaching on your key values. And you might have personal key values and you might have professional key values. And so in the classroom, empathy and kindness will always be my top values. Again, extending these values to students in the way that I did not get when I was in graduate school. And then you make your decisions accordingly. Now, to be clear, empathy and kindness are not antithetical to accountability. In my next slide, we'll talk about how both can be true. But when it comes time to offering the extension or listening to the student, I always frame it as what is the most empathetic and what is the most kind thing I can do. And we all know that suicide rates are skyrocketing among undergraduate students. And so one of the things that I never want to have to do is to talk to a parent about, well, what could I have done differently? And could something that was perceived as an unkindness, could that have played a role in a student's decision? Because I don't want to have those conversations. And I do know what it's like to not feel like you have any choices. And so because I know what that's like and I experienced it, I don't want students to feel that anymore. So that combines with my mission statement. And then just always recognize that teaching is hard. Oh my gosh, like it is so hard, especially in these classrooms of 300 students, especially in the age of the internet and AI, where learning is being devalued as I speak, right? Like it can be really hard not to become jaded or not to become resentful or not to take things personally. And so if we just say that out loud, yeah, teaching is hard, especially right now, but return to who you are, what are your values, how do they inform your identity, and just return back to that core as often as you can. I think that will go a long way towards staving off the resentment or the feelings of being jaded or that sort of punitive approach to the classroom. And then I encourage you to identify your cognitive distortions. Look at some of those seminal moments from your past. Name the cognitive distortions. If you need a list, just go to Google, type in cognitive distortions, read the descriptions, think about your past. If you're having trouble naming them, ask people you trust to help you identify what they are. And then practice compassion towards yourself, right? Get a therapist if you have to. Talk to a trusted advisor, a loved one. Understand that you were doing the best that you could at the time and you weren't aware of these cognitive distortions. But now that you know, you can consciously choose a different thought pattern. So you can catch yourself when your brain is distorting the situation and you can say to yourself, self, no, I am going to choose to think differently. And then extend to your students the compassion that you needed, right? Like always ask yourself questions about the situation. Do not assume that the student is just doing something to be lazy or they're trying to skirt the system or they're trying to pull one over on you, right? Now, to be clear, are there students out there like that? Yes, absolutely. but it is a really hard way to live, to be a police person in your classroom, to have that kind of vindictive and punitive approach to, nope, you didn't turn it in, sorry, like you just get a zero. That's a really hard way to live. Now, again, that doesn't mean there's not any accountability, but I have found, having lived both ways, I am a much happier and healthier and joyful person when I assume the best rather than I assume the worst about the students. And then also just simply to recognize that asking for help is healthy. Oh my gosh, like if I could go back to poor graduate student Kelly or even undergrad Kelly, who was like such a perfectionist and wouldn't step outside my comfort zone to try things that were hard, to just say that like it's normal. It's great to ask for help. People love to feel needed. And if you just reach out, someone is very likely to grab onto your hand and pull you up to help you. But then also, I want you to recognize that yes, you are going to be assuming the best and you're going to be demonstrating empathy and kindness and treating yourself and the students with compassion. But that also can be a heavy lift. So, to remind yourself that there are boundaries, like, yes, you can care about the students and you can hold them accountable. You can support learning and, like, you can't make them learn, right? When I interviewed for this job, one of my questions from the committee was, well, how can you motivate a student who doesn't want to come to class? And I thought about it and I said, well, I don't think I can actually motivate a student to come to class, right? Like if the external, or I'm sorry, if the extrinsic motivators of learning the material, right, and like the grade and the assignments, like if that's not going to do it and they're not intrinsically motivated, I was like, I don't think there's anything that I can do. But I said to the committee, I was like, but what I can do is model showing up even when you're lacking that motivation. Because there are going to be some times, right? Like this dumpster fire of the world that we live in that keeps continuing, right? I still show up because I believe change can happen. And I really believe in education being the key for that. And for students to understand that it is now my mission to get them where they need to go. So I don't always have motivation to do that, but I do it anyway because I really believe in my overall mission and purpose. And so just make sure that you maintain those boundaries. And then you can also focus on the students. Make struggle visible and normal in your classroom. This can start with the inclusive language on the syllabus. Tell them that struggling doesn't mean you don't belong here, that the course could be hard. To commend them and applaud them, that means you're learning. And how great is it that you're learning? You can also model this behavior by being very open and honest in lecture. You can tell them some of the things that they still struggle about. You better believe I share that crying over an A minus for a week story with every single gen psych class that I teach. So they can hopefully learn from my mistakes. And if they can't learn from my mistakes, then when they do make that mistake, they will realize that they are in good company. And if I turned out okay, then that means that they can turn out okay as well. You can also design your classes for different types of smart. I mean, we are in such a fixed mindset here in college because it's all about like the A. But to recognize that it doesn't have to necessarily be about the A, right? To recognize that there are other different ways that students can demonstrate their intelligence. So not just like, oh, I'm going to be a Hermione Granger and like raise my hand and be the first person, because that just means I'm a confident, quick processor. You can value the thoughtful written responses, a student who listens to someone else, a student who asks really great questions. One of my favorite things to watch is for a student to be sitting by themselves in the classroom and we do a think, pair, share, or a group discussion, and then other students notice that that student is by themselves and they draw them into the group. And oftentimes I will talk to those students after class or send them an email and be like, I saw that you did that. I think that was really great. It makes me so happy to know that you're the sort of person, or this is the type of classroom that that kind of behavior is just happens among the students. There's a lot of discussion at the Center for Teaching and Learning, when you talk about equity and inclusion in the classroom, about grading for growth, to allow mistakes, to grade the process, not the answer, to allow for revision. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because of the time, but if this is something that is intriguing to you, just Google grading for growth and you're going to have so many resources to choose from. And then we also have just addressing perfectionism, teaching that growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. Pay attention to the language that you use in front of the students and also model imperfection. One of my favorite things to do now is to notice a mistake in my PowerPoint slides before I go into the classroom. And then I leave it up and I will tell students, look, I saw this mistake earlier on and I chose not to correct it because as a recovering perfectionist, it is very good for me to stand in front of you all knowing I made a mistake with 40 of you staring back at me. Like, this is a really great learning experience. And to give students as many anecdotal pieces of evidence from your own life. Not only is that a way to connect and engage with your students, but it becomes more normalized that we are imperfect people. Even though we're leading the classroom, that doesn't make us perfect. And I strongly encourage you to think about good enough, right? Like, we talk about A's and we know that students want the A, but also to work with them to understand that a B means they're learning as well. And sometimes a B is just as good. And when you think about if you made a choice to prioritize, say, your mental health or your physical health, yeah, you might not get the A, but that B will be so much more meaningful to you. Make accommodations and flexibility to the norm, right? Like embed that into the syllabus so then it's not really seen as special treatment. For one of my assignments in my Gen Psych class, we have what's called the Growth Mindset SMART Goal Challenge. So students have all semester long to work on a goal that they set at the beginning of the semester. There are bi-weekly progress reports, and every student gets a 7-day grace period for those progress reports. Now, because they're time sensitive, after that 7 days, it turns into a 0, and I communicate that early and often with the students. But it doesn't matter who you are and like what your reasons are. It could be the silliest reason in the world, like you decided to binge watch Gilmore Girls and you did not get your assignment in. Like, that's okay. You don't even have to tell me. Every student gets that same flexibility. I also use classroom capture in my Gen Psych classes because that's the big 300 student class, right? And I told the students, look, college is also a time for you to understand who you are and what motivates you to come. And because I record my lectures, you don't have to actually be in class. Now, you do get benefits from being in class, but I would much rather have you be here attentive and engaged or view the lecture at your own time. And like on any good day, like I mean, we'll maybe only have half the class there, but I'm also trusting that the students are who are not there, like they're watching the lectures, or if they're not watching the lectures, they're already familiar with the material, or if they're not familiar with the material, then that's the choice they're making, and I don't have to control that because this will be a learning experience for them. And if they don't do well on the first exam, well, guess what? They have the second exam that they could do better on, and I already offer a lot of extra credit already on the syllabus. So these are just opportunities to allow for more accommodation and flexibility in the classroom. And then last but not least, I want you to just be curious and not judgmental with student missteps. Like, reframe any of the problems as learning opportunities. Remember, it's not about policing the student's behavior. You don't want to be punitive. Focus on the restoration and the learning and ask those curiosity questions like, well, what got in the way? What happened? How can we work together? Make it clear that this is a team effort, that it doesn't just have to be who they are. And so, in conclusion, I just encourage all of you to think about how your own struggles have built your resilience and how you could use that to make yourself a better professor in the classroom, to be an advocate for inclusion, and to recognize that that is actually the kind and the compassionate way to be a professor in 2025. And I really appreciate you showing up and taking the time to hear my story. Even though I'm very embarrassed by a lot of it, I feel like this is part of like the modeling imperfection and the being vulnerable and being compassionate with myself. So I hope you're able to get something from my story, to recognize if you're perhaps going to down that punitive or retribution type path, to realize that you can make changes. And I am happy to answer any questions that you may have about anything that I talked about in this presentation and beyond.
Thank you so much, Kelly.